Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Behave with Sue. My name's Sue Cowley and I'm an author and teacher trainer. And in today's video I'm going to be talking about intrinsic motivation. So this is the motivation that essentially comes from inside us rather than from some external factor, for instance somebody giving us a prize of some sort. And intrinsic motivation is essentially the motivation that we want all children to have. Because the great thing about intrinsic motivation is that it continues even if there isn't an adult or a teacher or a parent supervising the child. So if you're intrinsically motivated to behave well and work hard, that will support you in lots of different ways, for instance, in terms of better outcomes for your learning. Now, intrinsic motivation is a really complex subject, but a great way for trainees, NQTs and teachers to think about this is to consider those learners that they work with who just do it. I like to call them the Nike children. So these are the learners who don't appear to need external motivation to behave well. They just turn up on time, they have their equipment, they always do the right thing, they're helpful, they don't call out. So what is it that's going on for these children that might not be going on for other children? And if you make yourself a list of all the things that occur to you, something interesting happens, because what you'll find is that some of what you note is really obvious. So some children, it's about the home background. So they've always been supported at home, and that supportive environment at home feeds into what happens in a school or other type of setting. But other children, the motivation appears to come from somewhere different. So for instance, there are those children who are just academically curious. They're just obsessed with learning about things. Or there are those children who are really competitive, and it's that competitive nature that makes them want to strive, because they want to strive to be better than others. Intrinsic motivation, as it appears to teachers, can also be about something else that's going on in the home. So for instance, a child who really wants to please the parents, or sometimes to really please the teacher. And sometimes these intrinsic motivations are a kind of double-edged sword, because essentially we want children to work hard and behave well to please themselves rather than to please us. Where you do have children who are intrinsically motivated, they tend to be very good at being autodidactic. So they tend to be good at motivating themselves to learn. Although sometimes it might be about things that aren't necessarily to do with the school curriculum. So it's that young child who's so obsessed with dinosaurs that they memorise books and books and books about them. Or it's that child who loves languages and who is so into anime or some other aspect of a culture that they decide to teach themselves Japanese or another language. So intrinsic motivators, as you can see, are a really complex area. And there are some ways that teachers can support the development of intrinsic motivation. And I think one of the most useful things you can do is you can think about, well, look, how can I replicate this thing that some children have for other children who don't necessarily have it, who might need more of an extrinsic boost to their motivation? So it's things like, how do I make the learning appear so exciting, so engaging, so curiosity enhancing, that intrinsic desire to learn these things is activated. Now that won't always be possible, but certainly in the longer term it is kind of the ultimate goal, isn't it, to get your learners to want to learn even when they're not in school. Now this area is very, very complex, and I did mention in the last video that in our setting, the setting that I help to run, we don't actually use extrinsic motivators. So we don't have stickers, we don't have certificates, we don't send stuff home to parents. We have regular conversations, but we don't have external motivators in place. And something that might interest you actually is that parents don't even notice. They literally don't mention it because it's never been a part of what happens in our setting. We're lucky because as an early years setting, the children are, generally speaking, very highly motivated to learn through play. But as you can see, it's a very complex subject. Next video, I'll touch on the idea of consequences and how we use motivators to stop children doing things, as well as we might use them to encourage them to do things. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.